So maybe you've spent years on the sidelines, like not as a coach, just as somebody who loves the game. Or maybe you played growing up, or maybe you just love watching kids find their stride, figure out the teamwork thing, surprise themselves. Maybe somebody inspired you when you were a kid, and it helped you see who you could really become. And somewhere along the way, a thought keeps coming back. Oh, I could do that. I could be that person for a kid. Well, today's episode might be the nudge you've been waiting for. Tonight we're talking with Krystal Forsyth, an instructor of health and physical education here at Genesee Community College, about the New York State Coaching Certificate Microcredential. Yes, it's a mouthful, but it's a fast, focused program that can put you on the sidelines for real. So, Krystal, welcome to Study With Me. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to GCC.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I've loved hearing all about these podcasts you've been doing, and I'm really happy to be a part of it. So, again, my name is Krystal Forsyth. I am an instructor in the health and phys ed department, which means I am a teacher for students that come to GCC that want to become physical education teachers. The first 20 years of my career, I spent being a phys ed teacher and a health teacher. I have worked with students that are as young as 3, maybe at a local town rec program, all the way up to senior citizens doing silver sneakers programs, just working on staying active. So everything I've done is all about health and wellness and keeping your body moving. And I've been at GCC for about 4 years now. I live in Batavia. I grew up in Genesee County. And when I saw there was a retirement, I knew that GCC would be like coming home. So I've really loved working with this program and getting to know all about what makes GCC great from the inside.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
I love how you use that expression, like coming home. There's so many people that we've had on the podcast here that it's GCC is home. GCC is family. It's just so friendly. So
if you know, you know.
If you know, you know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into our program, and we'll start with the why. So it's a New York State Coaching Certificate Microcredential. So why should somebody be thinking about this microcredential? Like, what's the motivation?
Sure. So I'm going to talk about the coaching certification from 2 different points of view. Somebody like myself who has a bachelor's degree in phys ed and I have a master's degree in health education, I am somebody who has an umbrella certification for New York State. I can coach any sport that is offered through any sanctioned program, which means any school, a modified team, which is a middle school grade, JV, or varsity. So with that degree, because I took all the sciences and I learned how to break down the skills, so when you ever meet me or hear me talk about an umbrella certification, anyone who has that phys ed degree gets that umbrella certification. But we have this microcredential program for people who are not phys ed and they do want to coach for a school district. So you are somebody that has to take this avenue, for example, to get the microcredential. So you would look for an institution, hopefully GCC, to take all the classes that you need. And this could be somebody who is an educator and maybe they teach math or they teach home ec, or it's called FACS these days, and they need to have the requirements. So New York State has said, you don't have your phys ed degree, but you can still coach for New York State. Here are the classes you need. Or maybe you're not in education and you are a welder, or you are you own a restaurant, whatever it might be, you can still follow these same steps to become a New York State certified coach.
All right. So you talked a little bit about K-12 teachers and maybe they want to coach at their school. It's like the ye old English teacher coaching volleyball, right?
Correct, yeah.
The old stereotype. But what about, say you're a college student and you're looking at like a summer camp job or getting involved in a summer rec program. Would that be a typical student?
So typically you only need this certificate if you anticipate you will be coaching for a school district that offers middle school, JV, or varsity. You will get great knowledge about working with athletes and the human side of coaching, plus the science side of coaching and the health requirement, which is the first aid, the CPR, responding to emergencies. All of those skills obviously translate really well into anything you're doing with children or with rec programs, summer programs, whatever that might be. So yeah, a lot of translation.
Right, so if you are looking at like a sea of candidates out there and you want to stand head or shoulders above that, you might think about this micro-credential.
Yes, that would definitely put you above. We always tell our students anything you can do to buff up that resume, and this would definitely be the right way to go.
Right. Or also, like, I'm thinking adults, and like my kids were homeschooled for part of their education.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of like sort of leagues out there, travel teams, independent leagues, and they maybe the adults that are coaching have never had any formal training. Could this be a benefit to them?
Absolutely. So thinking about the homeschool piece, I actually did my master's thesis working with homeschool students. Wow. And by that time I had my coaching certificate on top of my degree. So anybody that, you think about the audiences that you want to work with, if you're somebody who wants to be able to help that homeschool community, you can get a coaching certificate, and it's not a full phys ed degree, but you're going to learn a lot about how to do that physical piece and be able to work with any types of audiences that are looking for that outlet.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And I'm going to guess that there's a legal piece here, too. Like you said something about needing the certification. What's the point where the certification, it's not just a good idea, but it's actually required?
Sure. So any person that works for a school district has to be a certified coach. If you're the head coach, you can volunteer. If you are a parent and a certain team at school says, we know that you played college volleyball, and yes, you're the English teacher and you don't have the certificate, but you can definitely volunteer. But if you wanted to be a paid coach for a program, you have to get your certification. But what's really great about the timeline that New York State has, let's say I need to get hired like this fall to coach a soccer team, but I don't have my coaching certificate. New York State says you have 5 years to complete the requirements, which is really great. So before you can be hired, you have to do certain things to legally be able to work in the school district. You have to have your background check and maybe get fingerprinting done, and all those things can be helped between the district office and BOCES. And then you have to be certified in first aid, CPR, AED for the professional rescuer, and you have to do some trainings that are Dignity for All Students Act. You have to be able to go through that training. You have to do the Schools Against Violence and Education training and the child abuse indicators as a mandated reporter. So if you're working with children, you have to know how to keep them safe in those elements as well. So those are the things you have to do to be able to coach. And then as far as the classes you would take, mainly with me, you have 5 years to complete those classes.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember I used to teach substitute math at the high school level and getting fingerprinted and the mandatory reporter training and all those kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same idea. All right. So let's talk about the classes, because you've mentioned, you teach some of the classes. And when we talk about the actual program, can you walk us through the parts of the micro-credential, like how many courses and what they bring to the table?
Sure. So there are 4 classes that we offer in this micro-credential program. The first one is, I should say these classes are offered through New York State. So if you were to go somewhere else to take these classes, you would take the same classes, obviously, with a different teacher. So on our campus, the first one is called PED 271. It's essentially the human side of becoming a coach. It's offered face-to-face in the fall. It's online in the fall, in the spring, and in the summer. So I offer it 3 out of the 4 semesters that we have. And that class is all about the human side. Why do you want to coach? We always want to start any of our journeys with the why. Why are we doing this? Why am I called? Why am I being called to this? Figuring out your philosophy. What's going to make you a coach that students want to come back and see every day? Then you're talking about how to write a practice plan, not even sport specific, but for legality purposes, I really harp to my students, you have to make sure your water breaks are listed on a typed out or handwritten lesson plan, or practice plan, I should say. So we talk about the importance of that, and we get into the nitty gritty of how do we handle something scary that happens, like a kid gets a bloody nose and you've never dealt with a bloody nose, or somebody passes out, or two kids get in a fight, all of the things. So so that first class is all about the human side of coaching. And then the next class is HED 209. That's the science of coaching. That's the how do we put a practice together so that our athletes are safe? What kind of stretches are we doing at the beginning? When am I supposed to be showing up to practice? You should be the first one to show up. You're the last one to leave. And then okay, now what am I doing for that warm-up stretch? And then how do I know what to do next? And how do I know what to do next? And what kind of stretches do I do at the end? And what is nutrition? And what are some of the basics, the very, very basics of nutrition and keeping the body safe? You know, for example, with wrestling, right? There's a lot of skin-to-skin contact, and we hear about ringworm, for example. So you have to be mindful of the things that are going to keep your athletes safe, whether it's weather, nutrition, contact with other human beings. And then the third course is the internship piece, which I think is really neat because you get to go out literally into the field or the court or the pool, whatever it might be, and work with a certified coach. You have to do 45 hours. And again, these are all New York State courses. So they kind of tell us, we have a nice packet that says, here, you need to teach this and you have to teach this. And then they need to do the internship. So 45 hours where they get to observe a coach. And during that time, they get to practice some of the basic things. So we say within the first half of your hours, can you lead a drill? And it can be a drill that you come up with and you talk about it with the coach, or if the coach isn't quite that flexible, you say, what drill can I lead? And they say, here, lead this drill. And then you just practice using the words, and you practice walking around the outside of the space and giving feedback and getting excited when the students or the athletes are doing what you need them to do. And then towards the end of the experience, you should be helping with the warm-ups and the setup of all the drills. But by the end, you just have to lead one full practice from beginning to end. And it can be from your own creation, or you sit down and you work on it with your mentor coach, and you talk about it at the end. You know, how did it go? What did I do well? What could I do differently? And what will I be mindful of next time? And then there's work we put on Brightspace for you to do all along the way. And then the last piece is getting the professional rescuer first aid CPR AED. So we do offer the course here on campus, but if you cannot do the face-to-face piece, then obviously go to your local Red Cross, and they'll have the weekend or the summertime flexibility to get that certification. So those three you definitely take with me. And then Becky or Jeff teach the HED 205, which is the responding to emergencies, or your local Red Cross.
Okay. And I was going to ask you because, you know, we have a fair number of students who are online. How would does an internship work for an online student? How does that work?
No, that part doesn't, because coaching is face-to-face.
Right.
Yeah, so they do have to be able to pick a time where they can commit to taking the internship course. Now, the fun part is, what do I want to become certified to coach? And this is something I get to have this conversation with our phys ed students, letting them know essentially this semester, if they are freshmen, you know, like, hey, you've taken the first class with me, you're taking the second class now. Now comes the internship. If you want to become certified in a sport that falls in the fall or winter season, then you would take that internship class face-to-face in the fall. Winter sports, that's kind of fun because you can either take the class in the fall because the winter season falls at the end of the fall semester, or the winter sport bleeds into the spring semester. So if you want to do a winter sport or a spring sport, then you would take the coaching internship in the spring semester. So for example, a student of mine, I happen to know him outside of GCC as well, and he is married, has kids. He has a really great job, and he has been helping with his child's sports teams, and he reached out and said, hey, Krystal, I heard you're the one teaching these classes I need. And he's obviously very busy certain times of the year, and he could have had the opportunity to do the internship in the spring, but he's like, I'm just so busy. He wanted a fall sport, but he had the opportunity to work with like a winter program for that sport. And so he's like, I'm going to have to wait and take it in the fall when my schedule at work is a little lighter. He's like, I can help with the team, and he was able to make that work. So that is the little caveat. You do have to be there in person for the internship.
Right. Well, that's that kind
because
of
it is face to face. Yeah.
Well, and then like the CPR first aid training, you know, they could do that through us, or they could do that through the Red Cross across New York State, so they don't have to be here necessarily for
Correct.
that training. Okay. All right. But
And
they
you
do
wouldn't
have to
have
do it
to-
in person, but not necessarily here.
Right. And with the internship, you don't have to be here local either. I've had students that were in New York City that they were face-to-face with their mentor in New York City, and they just still were online with me.
Nice. So if you're, I'm out in, I don't know, Chenango or something,
Yep.
and I'm an English teacher and I want to coach that volleyball because that's the thing that English teachers do.
Yeah.
But I could find a mentor out there
Yes.
to
Yeah.
work with.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So physical distance is not necessarily a barrier here.
Not at all. You can take it anywhere. Yeah. And we had somebody who was nervous about that. Like, do I have to be there? Where can I do the internship? I said, no, you do it wherever works for you. And I had a student who's on campus and he's getting ready to do his internship, and he's an athlete here. So I thought he would just work with his coach here. And he said, oh, I might want to do it at home with my soccer team. I said, you can do that. If you want to drive or find a team here, whatever you want to do. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. We've had a few other programs like that where there's an internship built into the program, and our remote students are just finding somebody local to them to work with.
Yeah, that's
which
great.
is really fabulous. It just helps everybody to be able to participate in the program. Makes it accessible.
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
So I want to ask you this. Let's have a fun question. Is there a particular course in this certificate program that students are really surprised by? Like maybe they didn't think it would be valuable, but it turns out to be really valuable, or it just turns out to be really different than they expected.
That is a great question. So I think, and this doesn't help the microcredential piece, but when I'm teaching this class face to face, there's a lot of who here had a coach that did this? Who here had a coach that did that? And the students are like, oh, yeah. And I'm like, that's why they were doing it. And they're like, oh, yeah. So when you see students transitioning from being the athlete to being the coach, and why they saw them walking a certain way and why they saw them setting things up a certain way. And it's all about safety. Like we always stay on the perimeter of our athletes. We always walk around the outside. You don't ever turn your back. Or who here had a coach that was really great at connecting? And how did that make you feel? So helping the students to relate their personal experiences to how they can then push that forward into their own professional life. So that first class, that 271, is really fun. And, I try to keep it on the positive. Think about an adult, and it doesn't have to be in a coaching avenue. It could be a mentor you had at McDonald's when you were 15 and they just made you feel valued and seen, and you remember that feeling that they gave you, and what about their personality made you feel that, and how can you convey that to somebody you're working with? Allow them to be heard, validate the things that they do well. Don't attack when they make a mistake. Be like, I see what you're doing there. Did it work? A basket, shooting a basketball, for example. Do you know why you missed that shot? And it takes time to be able to watch a body do something and figure out why it didn't work. I'm like, well, let's look at what your elbow is doing, and then you fix it, and then they make the next shot. And, I always joke, like, I'm the best coach ever, and I walk away, and they're like, yeah, you got me. So being able to have those aha moments of, oh, that's why my coach did that, or that's why we have to learn how the body's doing things, so it's really neat to see those clicks come together.
That's why we do so many things in education, and it's nice to see it that kind of carries through to all the different disciplines.
Yeah.
Not just teacher ed, but, coaching.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you now about sport-specific training. So you said something about an umbrella certification earlier. Does this certificate cover coaching a specific sport or a category of sports, or, how does that work?
Yeah, so for somebody who has that umbrella certification, you are somebody who has a phys ed degree or a master's in phys ed, and we take so many classes. And we take classes specifically to what an elementary aged body can do and what it looks like when it's doing those skills, and how to teach the basics of making contact with something with our feet. We call it manipulation. Manipulating something with our hands, or manipulating something with our body, or striking something, which means like a tennis racket, a badminton racket, or a long-handled implement, which would be a floor hockey stick, a field hockey stick, a regular hockey stick.
Golf club.
A golf club, a pool noodle, whatever it might be. And then as
LARP sword.
yes, a LARP sword. We love good LARPing. And then we take classes specifically to secondary education, which is that high school, that adult-sized body. And now we take the basics we know they learned when they were 7, and we think about the science of how do we now we learned how to skip when we were 5, and how do we turn that skip into a basketball layup. So a lot of our degree is taking the science and practicing that manipulation and just reading the books and taking the tests and doing all the practice. So that gives us the opportunity and the drive. We want to do all things. So when somebody says, hey, can you coach this sport? I don't know what the sport is, but sure, I'll do it. I'll figure it out, right? So the tricky part with these micro-credentials is, you're coming to us because you want to coach soccer. So we have to hope you have that drive to learn and to understand the sport, because these classes don't give you that breakdown of how to teach those skills. You'd have to get that from a degree program. But you have to hope somebody that's coming for these, they have a baseline. That English teacher that coaches volleyball, they could have played D1 volleyball, and they have it, and they have that drive to keep pushing forward. So you would have to do a lot of research, but if you're a lifelong learner and you're wanting to become certified, you probably have that drive to learn those skills. So this gives you you might already have the soccer skills, but now you're going to translate them into being on the other end as a coach.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you're not getting into it just to, do a sport thing. You're coming into it to do a sport that you have in mind.
Yeah, so you get certified in one single sport.
Right. Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's super short. In 4 classes? A typical student can finish that, like, how long?
Yeah, so you think 4 classes, the 205, that's your responding to emergencies. You can take that anytime. So you could double up. The 2 classes, the first 2 I mentioned, where it was the 271 and the 209, those are like the human side and the science side of coaching. I do like those to be scaffolded, where you take the 271 first, that's the human side, and then the next semester you would take the science side. But we have, of course, if somebody says, can I take these at the same time? Of course you can. Some of this stuff is repeated because it's just that important. So where you might talk about philosophy in this class, you're also going to have a little assignment in the other one because it's just so important to talk about. So you could take the first 2 classes together. You could take the first 3, actually. You could do 271, 209, and 205. So that's PED 271, HED 209, HED 205. You could take all 3 of those at the same time if you wanted to. That responding to emergencies, you take that anytime, because that's just a completely separate island of information about first aid, CPR, AED. And then we do just have to have all of those done before you do the internship. So in theory, you can get this whole thing done in 2 semesters.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Especially if one of those semesters is summer.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. But I think, probably ideally, maybe they might want to think about 3 semesters, especially if summer's in play.
Sure.
Right? It's still a year.
Yeah.
It's not too long.
Correct.
All right. Nice. Get into it faster than you thought.
Yeah.
So, all right. Let's say that somebody's listening right now and they're thinking, okay, this is what I need. Yes, this is where I want to go. And I can't believe it. I could do it in only 4 courses in a year. What do they do? What are their next steps?
Sure.
To get started?
So, the GCC website's a pretty great place to start. So, they would contact the Best Center, or just if you love to look around a website, you look for the micro-credential piece and you sign up to become do they have to sign up to become a student for the micro-credentials?
I think
apply.
so.
Yeah, so you go through the application process, which everyone gets in, which is so great. And then you register for the classes, and I get a lot of emails, hey, I'm joining this class. What do I need to know? Yeah, so you can always reach out anytime. But yeah, register for the classes.
All right. And so if they take these classes, do they just live as a micro-credential? Could you apply them? Say you did all this and then you decided, you know what, I think I might have a future as a personal trainer and maybe I want to go and get a bigger degree. Can they apply those credits?
Sure. So that's what Becky, our director, is really great about looking at and having the power to course substitute, for example. If they were to be in that micro-credential and say, I want to now become a full-time student and I want to do a phys ed degree, or I want to do a sports management degree, or I want to do a fit and rec degree, which is the 3 degrees we have in our program. I see all of those students in either 271 or HED 209. So those classes you would have already checked off, which is great. And everybody in all those programs has to take HED 205. So that's great. And then the internship, you only would take that if you were in the phys ed degree, and that wouldn't technically really count for anything else you would need in your degree. But the first class, that PED 271, that is a class that all phys ed majors take. All our sport management people take that, so they're students, so they can kind of get that human side of the sport management. And you have to wonder if that course could potentially be subbed in for something for the fit and rec, because the fit and rec students don't take that piece or that course. So yeah, I mean, you've already gotten 4 classes done with those 3 degrees, so that would be a great transition.
Good start.
Yeah, absolutely. So it lightens your semester if you're somebody who's trying to, yes, I think I want to get one of these degrees and I have to take 15 credits, but I've already taken Krystal's PED 271, so now I'm down to 12 credits. Yeah, it's great.
Or you can accelerate.
Yes, or accelerate and get it done even faster, so you can take something from the second semester and slide it into the first semester.
Right. I'm thinking of some of our adult returning students, especially when they start online. Many of our adult returning students will start online and they get a taste of it, and they get increased responsibilities or increased salary or increased position wherever they're at. And they think, you know what, I think I could take the next step too. And then move into that next step. And they tend to go at a pretty fast clip.
Yes. Yes. We've had students come in and just get their coaching certificate in a year. A friend of mine she's doing some higher ed stuff, but just 1 class a semester. So that's what's great about these online options, or just knowing the classes are always offered every semester. You can really go at your own timeline, which is great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So I just want to say this has been great. It's been great to hear about all the options. And I love that we're doing something that's not math. It's not math. It's not, your traditional learning. It's something that's more fun and more active and, physically getting out there. So if somebody's interested, where can they find more information? You mentioned our website.
Yeah, so you can go right on the GCC website. You can always, if you see my name or Becky Jackon's name, you can always email us. We're so excited to talk to students that want these certifications. What's really great is having, I guess, the word of mouth. We work closely with BOCES. So BOCES is really great I think it's important to know that when you get your certification, you say, okay, now what? I have the certification. How do I become a coach? You talk to the school district that wants to hire you, and they'll oftentimes, if you're in New York State, you're local, there's a BOCES office that they'll say you'll have to go to the BOCES office, and they'll help you just get everything set for New York State, and then BOCES says, okay, here's your stamp of approval. We give you certain certificates and things that you'll hold on to. They'll be on your transcripts here. You take it to BOCES. So BOCES can help if you're not quite sure, wait, what did they say, or what was her name on that podcast? I can't remember. So we work with BOCES, and they would say, you're going to reach out to the Health and Phys Ed department at GCC. They can help you get started. And that happened recently. We had a former student from 15 years ago who took this I don't know if it was a microcredential then, but she got her coaching certification in swimming. And she just wrote back just a couple weeks ago and said, and she's not a phys ed person, so she only was certified to coach that one sport. And she said, well, now I want to coach softball. What do I do? And we said, well, that's easy. That's easy. So she's doing just the internship. She doesn't have to retake all those classes, but she just is redoing the internship, and she has a phys ed student or a phys ed teacher on staff that's going to be her mentor, because they are a certified coach. So she'll do her internship, and she's hired as the head coach. I'm like, well, the hours are going to be easy. You're going to get that done in a couple days, right? 'Cause coaching is a lot of time. But the mentor comes in and observes her coach, and they talk about, what did you do well? And all the things I already mentioned. So now she'll just do the internship and a few of the requirements, and it's just a little bit of paperwork and a certificate, and boom, now she's certified to also coach softball, which is great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. And just so that you know, if you're listening to the podcast, we always we'll put the webpage and address and the email addresses of all the people that we're talking about will be in the description of the podcast on
that's
YouTube.
Helpful.
So that it'll be right there. Yep. And so before we close, I did want to ask, if there's one thing that you would like potential students to know about that coaching certificate microcredential, what would that be?
Biggest thing is if you don't have a coaching job yet, I love to think about these classes as there's 4 classes, but the certified first aid CPR AED is kind of on its own island. So the 3 classes you're doing with me, we think about these as interview practice. So when you're doing the work, you don't want to give a 1-word or a 1-sentence answer. You have to be able to show your passion for what you're doing, because if you're applying at a big district and there's 15 people applying for this job, you have to be ready to say, I'm the best person for the job and here's why. So a lot of the stuff we do in the class is to prepare you to be humbly confident in what you're doing. So that way you hopefully are the one that's getting hired for that job you're hoping to get.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. It kind of mirrors what we do over in the career services.
Yeah.
And getting them ready for that job.
That's great.
The next steps after they're done here.
Exactly. It's all about the big picture.
Yes. And such passion and such enthusiasm. Like, I love it.
Yeah, it's fun.
I love it. All right. So if you would like to learn more about the New York State Coaching Certificate Microcredential at Genesee Community College, it's genesee.edu on the web. We will put the direct link in the description below, and then all of the email addresses for Krystal and also for Becky that you mentioned. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to online learning at genesee.edu. And now I get to share with you our mantra, because our podcast has a mantra.
Oh.
It's a mantra that's good for community college students. We love it. It is progress, not
Do I
perfection.
put my hands up like this for a mantra?
Yes, mantra. And you can't see us, but we're doing yoga pose.
Yes, we are.
Progress, not perfection.
Yes, I love that. Progress, not perfection.